Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Convery, the podcast where we dive into the stories and insights of professionals who are shaping their industry and creating impact. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Rebecca Fiamboli to the show. Rebecca is a recent mechanical engineer graduate from the University of Guelph, and she's already building an impressive career. With hands-on roles at Tigercat Industries, Blue Valley Building, and Engineers of Tomorrow, she's navigating the early stages of her professional journey with purpose, passion, and intention. From a swimming instructor to mechanical design work, Rebecca brings a fresh, relatable perspective to anyone looking to transition from school into the working world. Rebecca, welcome to Coffee with Convery.
Thank you, Brian. I'm so excited to be a part of this.
We too, we too. Let's get started with some rapid fire questions. What do you think is your superpower?
I would say my superpower is my adaptability. When working within a team, I'm happy to fill in any role, whether it be the team lead, the coordinator, or the person crunching numbers. I would also say this makes me a pretty great person to go on vacation with, as I'm happy to trek through the rainforest or relax on the beach all day.
That sounds nice. That sounds nice. And it's a great superpower to have, by the way.
Thank
Thinking
you.
about high school, what was your favorite subject?
As a typical engineer, I can say I did love math and science,
I thought it was
but
going to be
for
math.
different reasons. Math I enjoyed because it had rules that you could follow, and as long as you knew the rules, you could do the question. However, when it came to science, I really fell in love because it was amazing to me to see how everything around us could be explained, from the weather to why my hair is brown. In high school, I loved chemistry and biology. However, throughout my university career, this quickly shifted to a love for physics.
There you go. Some really interesting subjects that I know I tried to avoid, I think. But that's okay. This is about you, not me. Uh, what was your favorite very first job that you have had?
My first official job was, in fact, being a swimming instructor.
Right.
And a funny story to kind of go with that. My first shift ever, I was thrown into teaching a parent and taught class, which meant that myself as a high school student was staring at 13 parents holding their 6 to 12-month-old babies, waiting for me to tell them what to do with them. And I can definitely say up to this day, that has been my hardest first day on a job.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah.
Oh my God. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
I think I'm going to go with devoted, whether it's describing the work that I do or even in my personal relationships. I tend to try and give them my 100%. However, going through school, I had to learn how to balance this
Mhm.
because there are definitely times when you need to learn how to prioritize certain tasks or commitments, even if that's commitments to yourself and your own health. And that was definitely a huge learning curve entering university.
Understandable. Now, I know as we were getting started, we're trying to talk about names and your last name, Fiamboli. You had said interesting story about how you found out some recent information about your background. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so my last name is quite unique. When you look at it up, it's typically just me and my family, and we always thought that my grandfather changed the last name somewhere along the way. It wasn't telling us why. Turns out it was actually a generation above him, and we just found this out about 2 weeks ago,
Wow.
where when they moved from Greece to Romania, they dropped off the S at the end of the last name. So it's actually Fiambolis. And now when you Google that, there's a whole bunch of people around the globe with that last name. So we're kind of interested in figuring out where our relatives are, if we have any out there. But we're happy to at least have solved the mystery of our last name.
It's so interesting. You think like, why the S? Like, why was it dropped, right? Like
What
in
was
that
wrong with
transition.
yes?
What was wrong with the S? But
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And I think as you're going to be jumping into a bunch of interesting family heritage and backgrounds soon, and I think will be really cool. So let's dive in. So, from high school to engineering. So as I was talking with you, a lot of our listeners are, in those different various stages of high school to post-secondary first job, sometimes people doing career shifts or pivots later on. But,
Mhm.
going back in time and thinking back in high school, how did you decide on mechanical engineering? And then what influenced your choice of the University of Guelph?
Well, this might surprise you and some of the listeners, but I actually started in environmental engineering at the University of Guelph,
Okay,
um, which was part of the reason why I ended up at the University of Guelph. However, I'll start at the beginning.
sure.
So my dad, he was an engineer, so growing up, I had a lot of exposure to the field, and we often went to events to expose kids and teenagers to the engineering profession. So when it came to deciding what my undergrad was going to be, there wasn't much of a decision. However, I still needed to decide which stream or discipline of engineering I would be studying.
Okay.
While I was growing up, I was always passionate about sustainability and the health of our planet, so environmental engineering seemed like it would be a good fit. Environmental engineering, however, was not as common as other streams like mechanical, and especially back in 2019, it wasn't offered at every university. So that's what drew me to the University of Guelph. I also took a tour through the University of Guelph campus in my grade 12 year, and I absolutely fell in love. In May,
Beautiful.
there's beautiful cherry blossom trees that bloom on the drive-in. And I knew I didn't want to go anywhere else. So that is a large or a huge recommendation from me. If you get the chance to tour a potential campus for you into your university years, definitely go for it. Um, but remember how I said I loved chemistry in high school?
Yep.
That quickly faded throughout my first and second year of university. And that's when I started to really fall in love with design. So Guelph offered a specialization of renewable energy and sustainability within their mechanical engineering program, and that seemed like a great fit for me. So I applied to switch my degree and transferred throughout my second year to happily graduate with mechanical engineering. The biggest takeaway is that if you aren't sure exactly what you want to do yet in high school, that's okay. Just do what you can to keep your options open, and you will figure it out as you go.
That's awesome. And see, I like that you're sharing the fact that you tried something, but then your eyes looked at something else. You fell in love with that, and that's a natural path and course of discovery, right? And I
Yeah,
think sometimes we get so caught up on the specific program, the specific school, the specific job, and something interferes with that, and we get confused or we worry about it. Like yours is a perfect example of how you navigated that and learned along the way, right?
definitely. And it can seem so overwhelming, especially I found in my grade 11 and 12 year, just choosing what it like everything it felt like you were choosing your whole life. But it really goes to show things will change along the way, whether it's you making them change or opportunities will just come along that you didn't even know. I never knew I wanted to be a mechanical engineer until I was in school. So
There you go. Now, interesting. I know that transition, from, being at home in high school and transitioning and, driving through the beautiful cherry blossoms and then see you later, mom and dad. How did it go for transition for you from, moving from high school into university where you had all the other added components of building out your life?
yeah, the transition was huge, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be super difficult.
Yep.
I found that if you move into residence like myself, that's already a big adjustment. You have no one making sure you're going to sleep on time, no one making sure you study, no one making sure you eat. And on top of that, all of your friends are within a 5-minute walk from your front door. I'd say that the biggest tip in the first week or two is to go to all of the social events that you can that are organized by your university during your orientation week. Remember that everyone is brand new and wanting to make friends. And being in engineering, I was in an engineering cluster within my residence, which basically gave me 49 other first year engineers right outside my door, many of which I still consider to be my closest friends today. Friends are great and they provide you with a community and support, but you also need to focus on your learning as much as an adult as that makes me sound. It is a step up from high school for many reasons, but I found the biggest struggle for many, including myself, is the big shift in responsibility. Your professor is no longer reminding you of every due date, an assignment, or online quiz, and it is up to you to make sure you submit everything on time and show up when you are needed somewhere. My tip is to sit down in those first few days of the semester and create a checklist on either Notion or Excel or whatever platform you want to use of everything due that year, from assignments and lab reports to midterms and finals. And I live by this. I always make sure that my younger brother, who's still in university, does it within his first couple days. This checklist will be your saving grace. It allows you to always know what is coming up, when your less busy weeks are, when your cramming weeks are. And the best part is you will find you get a rush of excitement or relief every time you get to check something off and make it complete. Um, and lastly, I just want to remind everyone that it's okay to be stressed sometimes. And it's okay if it's because you stayed up too late or if it's because you didn't work on something early enough, because it will happen. But instead of beating yourself up about it all day, just do what you can from here on out and try to remember what that felt like. So maybe it's a bit easier next time. And lastly, please go to class. You'll skip one thinking it's fine. And then next thing you know, you're 8 classes behind.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that because it's such a good, insightful view of some great tips and ideas to approach those things I like what you did because you're chunking it down into relatable opportunities to look at where you're headed, right? And who doesn't love a checklist, right?
Exactly.
So now let's flip to internships because I'm such a big fan of work integrated learning and I've seen some fantastic students do really interesting roles and also preparing them outside of the classroom for real work. How has the role of internships and opportunities integrated with your school and your experience? And what did it teach you in those roles that maybe was beyond the classroom?
Yeah, definitely. I loved every single one of my co-ops, and I think that they are so important for finding out what it is that you want and you value within a workplace. There's so much that you learn in a work setting that is different from your school. My co-ops taught me the value in working with good people, people you can go to with questions and learn from, and the importance of caring about the work that you do. When you enjoy the work that you get to do every day, it makes it easier. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing is your dream job, but take the time to throughout your co-op to learn and understand the importance and impact of the work you're doing so that you can invest more of your time into it, care about it, and feel a sense of accomplishment when you solve the problem or reach a milestone. I definitely recommend doing as many different co-op opportunities as you can. I found them a great way to work in different fields and even at different company sizes. You never know what you might like or might not until you try it. And remember that every experience is valuable, even if it teaches you what you might not want to do in the future.
Exactly. Exactly. Right? How do you know until you try it? Right?
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean you try it and you're like, I don't really like this. That's okay. Then don't keep doing it. Right? No, that's amazing. That's some great insights. Thank you for sharing that as well. Um, I know also you've graduated, you're entering the workforce. What's one thing you wish someone had told you while you were still in school about making that transition?
Yeah, so I found that the transition when going into the workforce or even just graduating in general is actually very similar to the idea that you brought to the Spark recruiting event that we met at,
Yeah.
um, that you are your own brand. And after graduating, it can be hard to figure out what this means. All your academic life, you can identify as a student, whether it's high school student or mechanical engineering student. And upon graduation, you now need to figure out how to portray who you are now as a professional.
Right.
You also have all this new time to explore your interests again, which for me has included exploring ways to be more involved with my community. But, who knows what you're interested in now? Last time you had time, you were not an adult yet. So it's time to kind of delve and rediscover who you are. One thing I wish someone would have told me in school is to keep notes at the end of every semester about certain projects or work that you did that you really enjoyed or played a key role in. As one, they're great to reminisce on and see what it is that's important to you and what kind of work you enjoy. But they also help you when you're having conversations with potential employers. You may think you will never forget the project that took you half a semester, but believe me, the details will fade after a while.
Yes, and those are the things that we were talking about at Spark Recruiting's event as well, which shout out to Spark Recruiting on this one,
It's like
um,
recruiting.
for hosting such a great event. The idea of storytelling is so important in the career progression interviewing process because also as interviewers and companies, people really remember what Rachel said about a specific thing she did, and sometimes those are the things that really make you differentiate and stand out, especially if they're meeting hundreds and hundreds of graduates. It's the
Yeah.
stories and the things that you can reminisce and also fast forward to bring into the conversation about some of the things you really liked and what you did and what you gained, but also what you gave to those projects.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
great advice, Rachel. Great advice. So you're certified in mechanical design with SolidWorks, is that correct?
Yes.
Why did you pursue that certification, and how do you, I know you're going to say what it is, but how do you see yourself as a lifetime learner playing a role in your career moving forward?
Yeah, so throughout our second year, we actually got the chance to obtain the certification through our studying. However, you did need to pass a test to obtain the certification, and I saw it as a great opportunity, so I really wanted to take full advantage of it. I did the prep courses and practiced as much as I could. Like I said, I switched into mechanical engineering because I really enjoyed design, and SolidWorks was a huge part of that. Although it can be frustrating at times when the software there seems to be a communication gap between you and the software when what you want to appear on the screen just does not appear on the screen. I really do love working on the platform and discovering even more of its capabilities. I wanted the certification to show that I not only could use SolidWorks, but that it was a tool that I'm comfortable working with. So that way it was something I could exhibit to like potential employers further on. Lifelong learning is very important to me, both recreationally and professionally. I believe that continuously pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and learning in areas you may know nothing about prepares you for situations where you may be caught off guard and have to act on the spot. I also love learning and expanding my knowledge base because the more things you know about, the more common interests that you can find when you meet
Mhm.
new. Throughout my gap year, I have had the opportunity to complete some side courses as well, learning more about project management and sustainability within the workplace. I personally hope to continue building my professional knowledge as I move forward in my career path. You never know when a snippet of information or a skill you've honed may come in handy.
100%, 100%. Now let's jump into mentorship and networking. I think that's an important topic too. And I know in various school programs, you get introduced to the concepts. You participate in networking events in all shapes and sizes. Some where companies come and do an information session, you do breakouts, talk to people, or you attend an event where there's just networking and you meet a bunch of people. How has mentorship and the power of networking played into your experience? And can you share some tips and ideas around that with the audience as well?
Definitely. I have been fortunate enough that two of my biggest mentors kind of came built in as my parents. They have always been so supportive,
Love
but
that.
also still seem to be able to answer my question no matter how old I am. And they have never held back with giving advice. It is because of them that I went into engineering and made it through my degree, and why I am not absolutely terrified to enter my post-grad adult life. My other mentors have been a mix of teachers and past professionals I've had the pleasure of working with. My first co-op, I had the opportunity to work with Rebecca White, another Rebecca, who played a huge role in helping me transition into working in a professional setting and not on a pool deck. She was always ready to answer my questions and share her own experiences to help both myself and my colleague not feel as overwhelmed, as it was both our first co-op terms. Other mentors along the way have to be the countless teachers and professors from grade school all the way to the end of university who took that extra time to answer questions, re-explain a concept, and help ease the anxiety of choosing courses and paths along the way. I agree, and I think mentors are so, so important. Someone to be there for you, to bring your questions to, or even just listen to their own lived experience, as you never know when it might apply to your own life. If you are seeking a mentor and have someone in mind, my recommendation is to just go and chat with them. People are often much more inclined to open up and have a conversation with you than you think, and they will likely feel honored that you even want to hear their advice and take time to listen to their own opinions. I have had the amazing opportunity to connect with multiple working professionals since graduating in my own small coffee chats, and listening to their personal career paths and advice has been so invaluable and serves as direct examples that you have so much more waiting for you after graduation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that the way you talked about mentorship because it's not just one person and it's a said and done. It's multiple people that you can go to for different things. It's various people that come up in your lives all through that journey, right? I
Yeah.
love shout out to your mom and dad. I'm glad they've been awesome mentors because having great parents is a great thing to have too. And I think the thing about it is sometimes we label this thing as such a like inanimate object and people are afraid to figure out how do I find that? And it's, believe it or not, it can happen more organically than you think. Like you said, reach out, talk to someone, ask them,
Yeah.
or, like, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this. I want to bounce some ideas. And then it can organically happen,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So it's really good. Let's talk about resilience and problem solving. You worked on engineering projects as a lead and coordinator. How did you build confidence when you're the new person in the room, what strategies to use, and when solving complex problems, when it's not just you solving a math problem, but now you're solving it with a group of people. How's that different? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is definitely a big one and something I have kind of worked on throughout my university career. Being the new person in a room can be scary, but it can also be exciting. Think of it as you get to show everyone who you are and what you bring to the table, making an introduction for yourself, and you get to meet everyone as well. Shifting my thought process from the situation being intimidating to it being exciting has definitely helped me face those situations with more confidence. This takes practice, however, which means you have to force yourself into these situations and do your best to shift your mindset every time. I promise after a while, it will become more natural and you will start to get excited. It won't just be a trick that you're trying to play on yourself. Sometimes, when I think about solving complex problems, I feel like that was kind of my entire degree. Um, but that also means that I have a lot of practice with it, and it means that I will only face more of it as I enter my career. I think the hardest part when it comes to solving complex problems, whether you approaching it yourself or you approaching it with a team, is simply just knowing how to start. I
Mm,
know that at times it can feel so overwhelming to face a problem that you just kind of want to avoid it and focus on other work, but eventually you have to start solving it. And along the way, the background stress will always be on your mind. My recommendation, which at times I still need to remind myself, is to take the first step, just dip your toe in, and it will all seem a little less overwhelming. Make sure you always understand the problem, whether it is an assignment, question, or a task at work. List out what you know about the problem and what you're solving. And if there are any gaps in your understanding, fill them in by asking for clarification because the knowledge won't just come to you sporadically. It is best to do this as soon as you can because then you can move on to the part that you actually need to do. The next step is to identify which tools you need, whether it's information, data, formulas, figure out what you need to use or how to solve the problem to go from there. Remember, it doesn't matter how big the problem is, the first few steps are always the same, and they're often enough to get the ball rolling towards the solution. When in doubt, brainstorm. Write down every single solution or train of thought that enters your mind, no matter how silly it seems, and go from there. And when working with a team, be encouraging, be open. Same with the brainstorming. Write down every idea that your team has. Figure out what trains of thoughts you can actually kind of go down and know how to recognize the strengths within a team and how you can work together to make it a bit easier on all of you somehow making it a team, instead of somehow it being a team makes it more difficult.
yeah. No, thank you. Super solid advice. Super solid. And one of the things I love too that you said was looking even at the gaps, because gaps in communication is a real thing in the workplace. And right now we have four different generations who talk, think, do things differently. And
Yeah.
so, sometimes, depending on your cultural background, depending on where you're from, you might communicate something super fast and the person gets half of it, and then there is a gap, but then they're afraid to ask. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, unless you know the full. So I love your advice about like look at those gaps and clarify it, right? And ask more questions because then you can get on to the work to be done. I think too often people are afraid to second ask or put themselves in that space. But the only way you learn through listening is to understand also the different diversity and cultures in the room, right, that are going on, and how you may think you heard something one way. You just want to make sure the clarity points are there. So it's amazing. Great advice.
Definitely.
Really good
Thank
advice.
you.
I want to talk a little bit about something I think that is super important in today's world, and that's allowing space for everyone in the workplace. And I think that sometimes when we look at the workplace, we see yourself too as a woman in STEM. I want to know how important inclusion is to you, and what are some of the things you have seen or you would like to see more as it comes to engineering world supporting more diverse talent, like people like yourself. And how can companies and people and hiring managers think about including you in those spaces maybe a little differently for helping you there.
Yeah, definitely. Inclusion is very important to me, especially within the workplace. Being a woman studying mechanical engineering, it definitely led me to multiple projects where I was the only female on the team, or even the only female on my team throughout my co-op placements.
Can I ask you that? Can I share one? How many women were in your program at school? Do you know roughly?
I know that mechanical or computer had the least amount
Yeah.
of, I don't have the exact numbers.
No, that's
I'm
okay. But
pretty sure if
lower
I had to
percentage?
guess,
Yeah.
if I had to guess, maybe 20% in mechanical specifically.
Okay.
There's more in like biomedical, I know is a huge field right now where there might actually be more females than males. So engineering as a whole has definitely seen a huge increase in female enrollment, which has been phenomenal. But I do know specific streams like civil, mechanical, computer, or software tend to be still very male dominated.
How do we how how do we fix that? Like, so you had a dad who encouraged you. What
Mhm.
about the young lady sitting at home thinking, this looks interesting, but I'm doubting myself or whatever? So how do we get to the younger generations to have more education to think about these fields or understand it? Because I feel like it starts back there, right? By the
Yeah.
time you get to school, but I don't know, I just feel like there's a missed opportunity to engage with more women earlier to talk
Mhm.
about some of these other things like you're doing, which that's why this podcast is great because we'll be playing this to all the people to listen to. But like, how did it, just thinking out loud, I know it's kind of throwing this in the mix, but there's got to be a way to engage more younger women into the thought of this.
Yeah, I think there's programs out there. For example, some of the ones I went to was like Go Eng Girl,
Okay.
those kind of things that target younger females and getting them involved. I think at the end of the day, it's just getting to know that those programs exist. Even in my first co-op with Rebecca White, she runs a program called the Engineer in Residence program. And
Okay.
what that does is they connect professional engineers with teachers in classrooms. So that way the engineers can go in and teach the kids what engineering is, which would then give those younger women like exposure to, or younger girls exposure to what engineering is and what that might look like as a career. Um, and I think at the end of the day, it is just exposure. I know for myself, I was lucky enough to have that through my dad. And without him, it wouldn't have been something I considered most likely. But just exposure and encouragement, I think, are
Okay.
the two largest
Yeah.
factors needed. I know that often when girls enter high school, they can face more challenges in feeling confident in maths and sciences or just in general. And I think that there are certain special teachers out there who just push through that and help them and encourage them. And I think that that's just what's needed kind of across the board because women are needed in engineering. And I just want to encourage anyone who may be thinking of going into another field because they might seem like they might be intimidated. Please
Yeah.
don't. Please go into engineering. You will have a great time there. And if at any point you feel like you need support, reach out to any upper year female students, and I can guarantee that they will be happy to chat with you, support you, and help you out throughout your journey.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I mean, this has been such a really wonderful conversation and just learning more about your journey from, high school to post-secondary and now out to the working world and all the experiences you've had. I really want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and being such an energetic guest and sharing all these insights because I really, as I said when we started this conversation, it's really important to hear from your peers and those maybe two steps ahead of you of what they've thought and gone through. And I really thank you for sharing your story with the listeners today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I want to thank you, Ryan, because I've had such just a great time sharing with you. And I want to thank you for creating this space to allow for people to not only share their stories and experiences, but also just to make them available to anyone who wants to listen and know the knowledge that's being shared.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this will be one that we'll feature here shortly for our listeners. And I want to end with one little thing is I think you're going on a special trip soon. Do you want to share that with the audience?
Yes, I am. On Sunday night, I take off and I am going to Northern Ireland for about a month. I had the wonderful opportunity from my friend who actually is also named Rebecca. I just know many Rebeccas.
All your Rebeccas stick
I
together.
know. And she lives over there. We met 2 years ago, and she reached out and said, "Hey, why not come live with me for a month?" And I said, "All right," and booked my flight. So I'm very, very excited to go out and stay with her, and very thankful that she's offered me the invitation.
I think we might have to do a part two and we'll talk about your trip, what you learned.
Definitely.
Well, thank you again for being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, really.
Absolutely. To our listeners, especially those just starting out, Rebecca's story is a reminder that you don't have to have it all figured out on day one. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. Also, you can find us at coffeewithconvery.com or on your favorite podcast platforms. And don't forget us to also follow us on Instagram for more inspiring content. This is Coffee with Convery reminding you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.